Hi, everyone, and welcome to my third book critique. This week, I also decided to focus on a genre like I have been doing, so I chose realistic fiction. However, before I get started talking about the books that I read, I first want to go over realistic fiction real quick. So, realistic fiction is a genre that consists of stories that could have actually happened to people or animals in believable settings. The stories resemble real life, and the fictional characters in the stories react similarly to real people. So before I get into the text, I just want to say that a lot of them can be looked at as realistic fiction, but they are also different genres as well as poetry, multicultural, which I'll get into as I describe them a little bit. So four of the books that I read this week were How My Parents Learned to Eat, written by Ina R. Friedman, illustrated by Alan Say. And this book is realistic fiction, but it's also multicultural because it deals with a Japanese woman and an American man who's stationed in Japan, and it talks about how they learn to eat using chopsticks and a fork and a knife, and it's just a really interesting book. The second book I read was My Mama Had a Dancing Heart. It's written by Liba Moore Gray, illustrated by Raoul Colon, and the genre is realistic fiction and poetry. This book just talks about a little girl's love of dance that she learned from her mom, and the whole book is this lyrical ballet that goes through the four seasons. Third book I read is The Ox Cart Man, written by Donald Hall, pictures by Barbara Cooney. It's a Caldecott Medal winner, and the genre is realistic fiction. This deals with an Englishman who packs up his ox cart with all the goods that they culminate throughout the year, and then he goes to sell them and brings it back, and he starts all over again. And it's a really nice journey-filled book. The fourth book I read was Uncle Jed's Barbershop, written by Marjorie King Mitchell. It's illustrated by James Ransom. It's a Coretta Scott King Award winner, and the genre is realistic fiction, and it's also multicultural. I actually did this book for my read aloud. It's a very interesting book about a little girl named Sarah Jean whose Uncle Jed cuts hair, and he goes through some financial trouble, has to pay for her surgery, and it's just a really coming together story at the end about believing in yourself even if no one else believes in you. Now I get to my featured text, which is The Patchwork Quilt, written by Valerie Flournoy, pictures by Jerry Pinkney, and it's a Coretta Scott King Award winner. The genre is realistic fiction. What I love about this book is it's very colorful. It's about a young girl named Tanya who loves listening to her grandmother talk about making her patchwork quilt and actually making it. So they decide to make one together, and over the course of it, the grandmother gets sick, but Tanya's so set on finishing it that she finishes it with her mom, and it's just a really great story about family history and almost like a family tree built within the quilt. So therefore, that leads me to my first lesson, which is called a classwork quilt. And in this lesson, students will begin by reading the story together in class. The book will be read directly after a unit on poetry. And then while reading the book, we will discuss family history and the importance of knowing where we come from. And then this will lead right into the activity that will showcase the students' poetry capabilities and their understanding of family lineage. So we will be creating a classwork quilt in lieu of the book's patchwork quilt. Each student will get to decorate a square piece any way they please, as long as it reflects themselves and their own personal history in some way. Each student must include a picture of him or herself that they think captures their qualities the best, and every student's piece of the quilt must also contain a haiku that either describes them, their family, or both. The haiku must contain at least one literary element and have narrative qualities while staying within the 575 syllable lines. All the elements explained must be present on each student's piece of the quilt, and once they are all finished, they will be pieced together and hung on the wall for all to see. My example, I didn't actually draw it out. I did do it on Canva like I've been going to recently for things. But the students will actually be making theirs in class. But while I was doing this, I did stumble across a lot of quilt mapping sites where you could potentially take all of the hand-drawn pieces, scan them into your computer, and then generate them into an actual quilt that could be potentially made. So my haiku is lost in a good book, like a sunflower she smiles, sipping her coffee. So then the background's a sunflower, and then that's a picture of my family, 3 out of my 4 siblings. It's just kind of what I did for this one. And then my second lesson would be Two Truths and a Lie, which I thought was really interesting because I immediately thought of the childhood game and common icebreaker, Two Truths and a Lie. So this lesson would be used during a unit on grammar and its usage after reading the patchwork quilt together in class. After reading the text, students will be asked to write 2 truths and a lie about their family history or themselves. At least one of these 2 truths or a lie must pertain to family history. Each truth and a lie must, however, contain at least one grammatical element from the list that follows, so like a conjunction, at least 2 adjectives in the sentence, a dependent clause, a prepositional phrase, and a positive, etc. There would be a longer list if I was actually teaching this. So after each student has written 2 truths and a lie, including myself, they will all be placed in a hat. We will take turns picking one sentence out of the hat, guessing who the sentence is about, and going over the sentence to make sure it is grammatically correct. There will be a running tally under each person's name written on the board until we reach the bottom of the hat. The lesson will not only be a learning adventure, but it will also go over grammatical elements and we'll learn each other's personal histories. So here are my 2 truths and a lie. So I have a conjunction. I have 17 great aunts and uncles from just my grandfather, but only 5 are still living today. Prepositional phrase, when I was 7, I had to jump off of an amusement park ride into my father's arms from 10 feet high after the ride broke down. Or in a positive, one time I dressed my cat Nala up for Halloween like my Webkins, which were stuffed animals, using their clothes. Which one is the lie? This would just be a really fun, interactive game where we're also learning, but we're getting to know each other in a decent way. And that's it for my book critique this week. Thanks all for tuning in.